Welcome to the IT Career Energizer podcast. For anyone who wants to build and grow a career in IT, develop and improve your strengths and skills, be inspired and motivated by the successes of others, manage your career progression, and achieve your IT career goals. And now, your host, Phil Burgess.
Welcome to episode 175 of the IT Career Energizer podcast. My guest on today's show is a world-class software practitioner and business coach, consultant and trainer. He is an author, keynote speaker, and a globally recognized expert in software development and delivery improvement, particularly using Agile, Scrum, and other Lean-Agile thinking approaches. So, welcome to the podcast, Neil Killick.
Thank you very much. Good to be here.
So, Neil, I'd like to maybe start by asking you to maybe expand on that introduction. It obviously talks very much about your involvement and a focus on Agile and Scrum and so forth. But how did you get into that? Where did you start?
So I was a programmer, first 15 years or so of my career, starting back in the late 90s. And yeah, I guess somewhere along the way, I started to become aware of, I suppose, the Agile movement. But even before that, I was always working quite naturally in that way, I suppose. I was working directly with customers, getting feedback on a sort of almost daily basis, collaborating, all those kind of, I suppose, Agile principles before I was aware that Agile existed. And then probably somewhere in the mid-2000s was when I became aware of Agile. And I just thought to myself, well, that just fits pretty naturally with the way I already work, so that's pretty cool. And went from there. And I suppose I then got interested in the topic when I joined a programming role, which was in a Scrum team, and I suppose it sparked my interest into Scrum as well. And started learning more about that, and then obviously uncovering the roots of Scrum, which is in lean manufacturing, and you start sort of there's a whole world of stuff that opens up, and then before you know it, you're an Agile, Lean, Scrum practitioner.
Exactly, yes.
And then here we are today.
So do you see yourself as a bit of an evangelist when it comes to Agile and Scrum and Lean and so forth?
Look, I suppose people would see me that way, and I would definitely have been like an Agile evangelist and a Scrum evangelist earlier in my career. Nowadays, I mean, obviously I talk and write a lot about these topics, but I suppose the emphasis I try nowadays is put more on the problem we're trying to solve and how we get our work done better and more effectively together, rather than sort of centering it on Agile or Scrum or any of the other methods or frameworks or tools or anything like that.
Sure.
So I don't evangelize Agile per se. I obviously am a big advocate of sort of Agile thinking and Agile mindset and Agile ways of working, but I try and make that more accessible to people who don't know much about it, by not focusing on that, because then the problem is you then start focusing on the processes and the practices and not actually about the ways of working and the ways of thinking, which is more reflects how I work. It's not a particular practice or a particular method that I use. I use a whole wide range of tools and techniques and thinking. So I sort of evangelize that rather than Agile per se.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And you also mentioned it's about the outcome as much as anything else.
Yeah, well, look, for me, it's always been about that. I started my career as a consultant, a trainee software consultant back in the day with IBM. That probably put me in good stead because it meant that my role was always not just about writing software. It was about solving problems and achieving outcomes for customers. So I always seek to find what it is that I'm trying to achieve, rather than just going blindly ahead with whatever has been passed down the chain. I often talk about nowadays, it's funny how we have these kind of separations of roles like programmer and business analyst. When I was a programmer, we were called analyst programmers. We were expected to do the analysis on what it is we were supposed to build and how it would solve a problem for the customer. Whereas ironically, nowadays with the rise of Agile, the programmers are actually further away from the customer than they probably were when I was working back in the late 90s and early 2000s. So it's all about outcomes and objectives, problem solving for me. It always has been, always will be.
Okay, so Neil, can you perhaps share a top career tip with the audience, one perhaps that they should know and may not?
It's always difficult, when you look in retrospect as how you've ended up where you are now, and if there was any particular key moment or key decision that led to that. I would say in my case, I have done a lot of stuff. I've worked in many, many, many companies. I think the longest tenure I've had anywhere has been about 3.5 years. I know a lot of people spend many years in one place. It's always quite sort of remarkable to me because I suppose I find it difficult to imagine doing that. I suppose my brain has always been wired to not get bored. I think bored is the wrong term, but to always be seeking a new challenge and feeling that I've got momentum in what I'm doing. So my career has spanned all kinds of roles across IT and software and also the business as well. And because of that, I've got experience in all of those things, which really helps me now in terms of connecting the dots when we talk about building software. And it's in Alistair Coburn's words, it's a cooperative game. We have to work with people, not just other programmers. We've got to work with people across the business. So getting experience from all of those different areas and different types of companies. I've worked in startups, I've worked in big corporates, medium-sized companies. So that wide range of experience has shaped, it helps me do a better job nowadays. So probably my career tip would be to just immerse yourself in as many experiences as you can in your career. And, even if you stay in one company, experience other roles in that company if they give you the opportunity to do that. If they don't give you the opportunity to do that, you've got to seek to grow. And the only way you can really grow is by moving to other companies and getting new experiences, new people, new domains. I suppose I'm not saying that people should just hop around jobs willy-nilly, but definitely be driven by your purpose and your values. And I find myself leaving places if they don't align with my value system. It's extremely important to me. I want to be doing things that I feel like I'm making a difference, making a contribution. If I don't feel like I'm making a contribution, I feel like I'm drifting along, then I will, try and speak to whoever I can in my role to make it happen. But it's just not going to happen. And that happens because companies go through different phases and projects go through different phases. And sometimes you just, through no fault of your own, you end up in a situation which isn't good for you, mentally or career-wise. So if that happens to you, then look around out there. It's a thriving market out there with a world of opportunities out there. So keep looking and keep sort of striving for growth, I suppose.
Do you feel for yourself, though, that it's partly down to your need to learn and maybe expand?
Maybe. I don't think I've ever really looked at it as a thirst for learning. So maybe earlier in my career, I probably really, really was trying to learn as much as I could. I still do enjoy learning, but I would say now that the driving factor for me is more my values.
Yeah.
I want to be working with people, with people that I can trust and respect and have integrity and have a sort of a driving passion for doing the best possible job that they can and delivering an outcome. I find that I struggle if I'm not with like-minded people in that respect. Nowadays I'm a independent consultant, and I tend to work in kind of quite short engagements with businesses, very, very objective driven. I very deliberately make them short because I want them to be objective driven and not just sort of, particularly with a role like kind of agile coach, it can so easily just drift into, you don't really know what you're trying to achieve. You're just, floating around coaching. It's very dangerous when you end up in that situation because you just don't know if what you're doing is aligned with what is expected of you and wanted of you. So yes, I love learning new things and probably always will. But I'll say that's probably more earlier in my career as the key driver than it is nowadays.
So, Neil, can you perhaps tell us about your worst IT career moment and what you learned from that experience?
I mentioned before that I've worked in sort of startups as well as large corporates. Working in a startup, you can get lots of amazing positive experiences, but you can also get a lot of negative experiences. And that's the risk you take when you join a startup. And, I worked for a startup earlier in my career. And, when I first joined, it was fantastic. I was working with some of the best developers in Melbourne. The company had, really had a lot of seed funding and was spending money on bringing the best people into the company. So I was working with fantastic developers. I was at this stage in my career more of a sort of business analyst slash scrum master slash iteration manager, and became a product manager a bit later. But so it was fantastic when I came in. But I suppose what became apparent over time was that the company was kind of really lacking in a bit of a vision and a direction for what they were trying to achieve. And what that meant was that in our teams, we were basically very, very frequently being asked to change direction and throw away what we were building, which is kind of bad enough. But it actually got to the point where it became quite toxic in this company. I suppose because of the lack of direction and so we weren't really achieving much and we're building things every day, but none of those things were really what the sort of founders of the company really wanted, and they just kept changing their mind on what they wanted. So people are getting more and more increasingly frustrated because we just weren't seeing the fruits of our labor. Then what happened was the senior leaders thought that it was the developers were the problem, or the management of the developers was the problem. And so then brought in these very, very traditional thinking project managers who basically came in, and I remember literally being brought to a sort of an all hands meeting for the company, and basically they tore down the sort of I suppose the agile culture that we built in the space of like 10 minutes. Basically, so they'd basically written a document. It sounds ridiculous when you actually reflect back on it, but they'd written a Word document which basically said, in the first paragraph said, this agile stuff that you guys are doing isn't working. We're now going to bring in a new methodology.
Right.
And basically they brought in this, I don't even know what we'd call it, but it was this kind of really task-oriented methodology where literally we would end up doing like 3 months of detailed task planning up front, really literally down to the tasks we would be doing. I'd become a product owner at this point. The product owners had to go and leave their teams and go and sit together. The testers had to leave their teams and go and sit together. So basically we reformed functional silos rather than cross-functional teams. Yeah. It was almost like running a video backwards of an agile transition. And of course, which, all of that caused a lot of, everyone got very upset and annoyed. And then, to be honest with you, the company then, it actually got really, really toxic after that. And they even stopped paying people's superannuation and then even stopped paying people's salaries. But yet they were continuing to hire people whilst not paying the existing staff. So I remember they would actually be parading around new people, and the people sitting there who hadn't been paid for 3 months.
Oh dear.
But were being asked on faith to carry on. So I would never sort of throw away the experience of that because, at the beginning of that role, I learned a lot of very valuable things about how not to do things. It's almost like the textbook on how to not run a startup, which was extremely valuable. And at the end of the day, it's the sort of bad experiences as well as the good that shape how effective you can be later on. The reality of our industry is that things go wrong, and that's fine. Every project or every initiative, is going to have ups and downs and things that don't work and things that you just have to can and what have you. But what it also highlights is that there is some toxic stuff that goes on in our industry, and you've got to be a bit wary of that and be a bit careful. You've got to immerse yourself into experiences and try these things, but also be aware that, particularly with startups and what have you, particularly when they're very, very driven by the funding that they're getting and they don't seem to have a real purpose and direction. I was at that stage of my career, I just didn't see it coming because I'd never experienced it. So nowadays, you become a bit more world-wise and you can see patterns of behavior and that happen, even in larger companies, when you can tell that things are getting a bit toxic and you can tell that there's management are hiding things from people, and it's I suppose you build up a sixth sense of these things. Whereas when you're younger, you just kind of you're just happily merrily going along, and because you typically don't have that much responsibility, so you're just doing your job and learning things, and you don't really see the stuff that's going on perhaps further up the company. So yeah, that was a pretty it got dark at the end. I suppose I was quite fortunate in a way that I got asked to leave the company before it got really, really toxic. And a few other people were as well. Again, just completely out of the blue, just told, it's not working out for you here. Sorry,
Yeah.
off you go. which was kind of just total nonsense. And I've had sort of similar experiences elsewhere, but I'll say it all shapes
It does.
our experience and helps us be better practitioners later on.
Yeah. Okay. So, Neil, moving away from your worst moment, can you perhaps tell us about your career highlight or greatest success?
A career highlight. So it's interesting. So, you can interpret this in different ways. Some people might think of it as, this was the kind of defining moment of my career or whatever. When I look back on my career, and it's been, I suppose, about 23 years now, the fondest memories I have are the ones where I was just working with a really smart, engaged team on an interesting project which delivered a great product for the customer and a great outcome. And I remember I used to work for a company that does sort of geospatial technology and in-car technology, like sort of telematics is called. So in-car technology. And I actually got to work on some of the first, nowadays we use like Google Maps and it's very second nature to us, and we, driving directions and everything. But when I was working for that company at the time, I think it was, early 2000s, we were working on some of the first sort of trip planning applications and traffic management and more traffic estimation technology. The RACV here in Victoria, they had a trip planner on their website, and it was kind of the first website where you could go in and put in where you wanted to go, and it gave you driving directions. So I was involved in writing that. So what was great about it was that I was writing the code to do it, but also also was able to sort of do things like get out on the road and be testing out routes of journeys, and the traffic stuff was really interesting as well. So doing sort of traffic estimate how long the journey is going to take, figuring out what to include in that estimation, because you've got like the flow of traffic, but then we'd also be incorporating data from the sensors at the traffic lights and what have you. So it was a really, really interesting thing. And it was, I suppose I'm quite proud of that now when I look back at the stuff I've built, to be involved in some of the sort of first, at least in Australia, I don't know worldwide, but online mapping and route planning applications. I enjoyed it from a technical challenge point of view. I enjoyed it from the people I was working with were super smart. I actually explicitly remember working with smarter people. And that's a great tip, is to, surround yourself by people who are smarter than you, because that's how you grow and learn new things. And it feels scary and challenging at first, but then it feels fantastic when you start to really sort of learn new things and mesh with those people. So I enjoyed it from that perspective. I enjoyed it that we had autonomy. There was no one passing down requirements and solutions to me and saying, this is what we need you to build. We were discovering what we needed to build. We were we're experimenting with different frameworks. We were figuring out how to solve the problem, which is, what I sort of try and advocate for nowadays. To go back to your question about evangelism, if anything, what I evangelize nowadays is giving the smartest people in our companies, which tends to be the developers, give them problems to solve, and don't tell them what to do and what to build. Because when you do that, it sparks all of the reasons why you became a programmer, the pursuit of sort of creative problem solving. It feels fantastic to be given a problem to solve, and you get to figure out how to do it, and then you solve it, and then you see the fruits of that, and you see that become a sort of successful product in the wild. Is a pretty awesome feeling. Yeah, so that's probably would be one of my career highlights. Yeah.
So, Neil, what excites you about the future of the IT industry and careers in IT?
I think the exciting thing about it is that there is such a variety of roles in sort of IT nowadays, because IT is now no longer just the sort of the dodgy part of the part of the company where the geeks sitting in the corner, fixing your computer. It's now permeating across everything we do in business. What that means is that that even if you're not necessarily interested in the sort of programming side of things, there are so many other roles in this, technical roles and non-technical roles in IT, because it's just open. When you look at roles like product owner, this role has really emerged from IT in terms of from Scrum and Scrum software teams. But that role is all about being a business representative, a customer representative. So, my background is all in technology and programming, but I had to sort of start learning about how business works, and how do we write business cases, and how does that turn into things that we're actually going to build. And you start learning about all of this ecosystems across the business, that, let's say, permeate through technology. So there's just a plethora of opportunities for people, and people coming into IT. We see a lot of people who are recognizing that there are roles in IT that aren't necessarily going to need them to suddenly be expert technologists, and they can come into IT, which is fantastic. People are coming across from having no experience of IT into roles like Scrum Master and Product Owner, and then immersing themselves, into product development, that product development ecosystem, which, nowadays I tend to not even call it software ecosystem anymore. I call what I do product development, because really the software is kind of a given. We know that we're writing software. In most cases, I know that there's places that are purely hardware and what have you, but in most cases it's software underpinning what we're doing. And you just seeing those world of opportunity open up, which is exciting. For just new people coming into the industry, but also I suppose one of the challenges with our industry is that it's very, very undiverse. It's very traditionally been sort of middle class white men, and now, because it's really branching out and into wider across the business and across different industries and different types of companies, it's just naturally becoming more diverse. And then to add to that, there's a recognition that we need to do more in the industry to make it more diverse and bring more diverse thinking and backgrounds and cultures into our industry. So, that's exciting because it's a recognition and it's happening, and big companies are actually recognizing this and having initiatives to do that. So, I know from experience that the best teams I've worked with have been the ones that have been a mixture of people, men, women, old, young, different cultures, different backgrounds. Those are the best teams because it's a meshing of experience. If we're all the same, the software and the products that we build are all going to be they're not going to be fit for purpose for the wide ranges of customers and users. So so I think all those things are exciting.
Yep, no, I agree. You've touched on a number of things there, and particularly, obviously, diversity. That is so important. Yep. Okay, we're going to go into the reveal round now. We're going to find out a little bit more about you and the way you think. Are you ready for this?
Okay.
So what first attracted you to a career in IT?
So this one's pretty easy. I think I remember my dad bought me bought us, should I say, a BBC microcomputer back in the 80s, 32K memory.
Yes.
And it was just amazing, right? It was just this amazing device. So I just I would start spending hours on that thing every day, and I learned to program on it in BBC Basic, and started writing programs for doing all kinds of things. I remember I wrote a program for I used to play a lot of snooker, and I wrote a program that would allow us to do scoring in the game and have like biggest break and all that kind of stuff. And I remember if the computer had been on for about an hour running this program, it would like heat up to the point you could like fry an egg on it. So that was so I think I just fell in love with technology. So, and then I did computing at university, and it was just a natural thing for me, I suppose, to get into IT as a career.
And what is the best career advice you've ever received?
The one I can remember most was actually not that long. It was a few years ago. It was actually and particularly in the nature of the role, where I came in as a portfolio manager or a program manager, but this really applies to any role. The advice was that, when you join a new company, you're going to get added onto all the mailing lists and what have you, and you're going to get bombarded with meeting invites. And what we tend to do, even when we're not new, we tend to accept meeting invites as almost like a default. And what my friend said to me when I started this role, he said, look, when you get these meeting invites in, don't just accept them all. It's really important, particularly in your role, to make sure that you have availability in your calendar so that you can actually do your job. So, you're managing people, you're managing a portfolio if you spend all your time in meetings, you're not going to be able to do that. I speak to so many people when the different companies I work with whose their days are just dominated with meetings. Like and it's almost like a badge of honor. If your calendar is filled up with meetings, it shows that you're busy and you're important. Well, actually, I don't think anyone, no matter what role you're in, can do your job if you're in meetings all the time, and particularly if you're supposed to be taking care of other people and you're managing other people. So I think that's probably the best advice I've ever had, is to actually make your default to not accept meetings and only accept ones if it's very clear what the purpose is and it's actually going to be a value add for them and for you. Yeah, don't fill your calendar with stuff. Actually figure out what you need to do to be successful in your role. Figure that out, and that's independent of the meet. That's other people setting their priorities and agenda on you. That's not you setting your own agenda.
If you were to begin your IT career again in today's world, what would you do?
It's interesting, actually. So, actually, the other week, I was hosting a meetup, and there was some young graduates there who were looking for internships in product management, and it sort of got me thinking about, what's my advice to them, and my first reaction to them was probably represents what I'd feel about this, is that you just need to initially find a role that is going to give you maximum exposure to the most sort of experiences that you can. We'll try and identify whatever role it is that you accept. Try and identify the people around you that you can learn stuff from and basically attach to them, and almost, whether they like it or realize it or not, make them become your mentor.
Yeah.
Go and actively learn from them, because the only way that we can get experiences in things is to actually just go and do it. Reflecting back on your question earlier about learning. Okay, so, obviously, when we're just learning things by reading books or reading articles, what we're learning is we're really learning theory, even if it's presented in a practical way. Until we've actually experienced it, it's just theoretical. So, and so many times I've sort of thought that I've learned something useful, and then when I've actually tried to apply it, I've catastrophically failed in applying it well. And then, often we then mistakenly think that there's a problem with the thing that we've tried, rather than the fact that actually anything new that we try is going to take lots and lots of iterations of doing it before that we actually uncover the effectiveness of it. So we have to actually experience just throwing ourselves into things and trying things and failing at it really, really badly in order for us to get better at it. So, for example, like often people come to me, like I coach, budding Scrum Masters, for example, and they say, how do I make sure that I've got a planning meeting come up? How do I make sure that I facilitate this planning meeting, really well, and what have you? And you know what, I can give them, I can give them some tips, but at the end of the day, if you're facilitating your first planning meeting, it's going to suck really, really hard. It's going to be a catastrophic failure, and you actually have to embrace that and just realize that it's part of the journey of growth. So rather than doing a lot of book learning and theory learning, that's all great. So I would definitely not suggest you don't do that. But really, what's more important is to just try and accept every opportunity you can to do something that puts you out of your comfort zone, to do something different that you've never done before. When I accepted a portfolio manager role, I'd never been a portfolio manager before. At some point, in order to get experience, at some point you're going to start with zero. It's the only possible way you can get experience. So you throw yourself into something not knowing how to do it, and then you learn how to do it by doing it. That for me is what I've kind of done all the way through my career. Sometimes people call it fake it till you make it. The only thing I'd modify there is that I'm not pretending that I know what I'm doing. I'm very explicitly saying, look, I've done this before, but I haven't done this before. So, this thing will be new to me, but hey, I am passionate about doing this thing well. So I'm going to probably do it badly the first few times, but then I'm going to get slightly better and then slightly better. And then before I know it, people are then looking to me to mentor them and coach them in that thing. So that's probably the best piece of advice I can give is to just take opportunities when they come and throw yourself into it, and don't expect that you're going to be good at it straight away. And don't just rely on book learning, and don't just rely on, there's no fast track to becoming an experienced practitioner. You've actually got to live and breathe the the bruises and the good times, the bad times. You have to live through that. Expect that you're going to need experience to become really, really good at those kind of roles, like product management, any kind of management role, any kind of coaching role. It doesn't matter how much theory you know, you'll never be good at it until you've actually got plenty of years under your belt of doing those things. And you only get years under your belt by immersing yourselves with people who've done it before, learning from them, experiencing, observing them, trying what they're doing, and then adapting and figuring out how to do it yourself.
And what's the number one non-technical skill that has helped you in your career so far?
Again, when I think to myself of what I look for when I'm hiring people, what's that sort of core skill that sort of transcends whatever it is the nature of the job or the project, the specific project we're working on, is there's two, and one's humility and the other one is empathy. Now, humility probably isn't a skill; it's probably it's a trait that one exhibits. But empathy, I think, is a skill that you can learn. You have to have a natural tendency to sort of care about people and care about what the effects of what you do has on other people. But when you think about the nature of what we're doing, and at the end of the day, we need to work with other people for one, and we're building things that for customers and for clients. So we need to be able to put ourselves in the shoes of other people in every aspect of our work. So whatever it is I'm doing every single day, it's if I do this, what is the impact on other people around me that I'm working with, my colleagues, my managers, and also my customers? If I put myself in their shoes, am I giving them what they need? So I suppose that persistence and the relentless pursuit of meeting people's needs over just doing stuff that you've been asked to do and not worrying about the consequences, for me, it's sort of a leading indicator that if you sort of operate in that way, then you're not going to be a particularly effective practitioner in sort of the IT space. So empathy, definitely.
And Neil, can you share a parting piece of career advice with the IT Career Energizer audience?
Again, when I look back, I have made so many mistakes over the years in terms of, I suppose, the way I've treated people or behaved. And what I mean by that is, I don't mean treating people poorly, but I mean, often when we learn something new, we almost start thinking that we know everything about that thing. We can actually, if we're not careful, become a bit arrogant about that. And we forget that we're often working with people who have probably been through what we've been through and have gained more experience. And now, there's this sort of upstart now sort of telling them how things should be done. So the best advice I can give is that there is always going to be people with more experience than you in different, and often we talk about experience in general terms, but people who've had lots of different experiences over the years and probably know a lot more than you. So we've got to be humble about our about what we know and what we don't know and how we approach things, and do not try and change people. Do not try and convince people of things. Particularly in the agile space, and this is why I kind of shy away a little bit from the evangelist thing, is that when you learn about something new and you think it's awesome, you then sort of naturally start evangelizing it and telling people, oh, this is the way you should be doing things. And there's a little bit of arrogance, often in the agile community of, if you're not doing things this way, then you're not agile and you're not effective. I've been part of that problem, and I've sort of reflected on it, and and I've tried to become, much, much, much better in that and in not doing that, and actually meeting people where they are and appreciating, that there's a context behind every situation and where they're at and how they've arrived in that situation, and just helping them navigate through it rather than judging them in terms of why they're doing things in a particular way. I think that's sort of just really, really focusing on not judging, being humble, because that is how you actually influence things for the better, and how and well, you have a better time and you enjoy it more because you don't have you have fewer kind of conflicts with people where they get prickly with you because they think you're trying to change them or convince them of something. So it's better for you, and you're going to probably go further in your career if you have that humility. there's a fine line between confidence and arrogance. And it's good to be confident as a young practitioner, but if you show arrogance, then sort of more experienced people will probably step away from you rather than embrace you and want to help you up the career ladder. So I hope it doesn't sound too fluffy, given that we talk about IT. But I honestly believe that nowadays that the best traits in IT are humility and empathy, because we are working with people. So we're no longer just the geeks in the corner. We're working with non-technologists, technologists, people who have lots of different experiences in terms of what technical means. Often we say technical meaning just development skills or programming skills, but there are so many other aspects of being technical. Even things like facilitation skills. That's a technical skill. It's not a soft skill. That the ability to be able to facilitate 20 people in a room in an hour to come to a very specific outcome at the end of the hour is a skill. It's a hard skill, and it's something you have to hone and hone over the years. So, we should not underestimate and undersell all of the skills that go into building things effectively together and working effectively together. Arguably, they are more important than any technology or any technical skill that you have. So, if you're empathetic and humble, people will want to mentor you. You'll learn loads of stuff. You'll get loads of new experiences. Customers and clients will gravitate to you because you're trying to help them and passionate about solving their problem rather than just doing what it says on the contract or in the requirements. So that for me it would be probably my major piece of advice.
And finally, what's the best way we can find out more about you and connect with you?
So I have my website, neilkillick.com. So you can contact me through there. I'm also on LinkedIn, and I'm very active on Twitter, Neil_Killick. You can contact me in any of those ways, and that would be the easiest way to do it.
Neil, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. It's been great chatting with you.
No problem at all. Thanks, Phil.
Well, I hope you enjoyed listening in to today's episode and to my guest career tips, advice, and experiences. You'll find a show notes page for today's episode on the IT Career Energizer website, which will be itcareerenergizer.com/e and then the number of today's episode. And a quick reminder that the show has now 3 episodes every week on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. So make sure that you are subscribed to the show to get new episodes automatically downloaded. Also, don't forget to join the IT Career Energizer community Facebook group. You'll get to engage with other like-minded people, get to find out more about upcoming guests and other episodes, and can get involved in the future direction of the podcast. It really is a great pleasure to be able to talk to so many inspirational people from across the industry and to be able to share their stories and advice with you. Thanks for listening, and remember, if you're not growing your career, you're slowing your career.
Thanks for listening to the IT Career Energizer podcast. To find out more about building a successful career in IT, visit itcareerenergizer.com.